We're starting with Big SUEY today because we have what is, I believe, total chaos around here in our scheduling. Roy, I turned on my television last night. He's wandering around the ice of the Stanley Cup final. And
was he really?
Yes, he's wandering. He's wandering around the ice, and everybody
on Twitter.
Everyone was sending us photos of Roy wandering around on the ice. How do you think they recognized it?
He was wearing a green jacket. It really stood out.
Roy's on his way back. Mike is bombing down the highway because, as a surprise, he ended up there last night to finally see those vampires buried. And I will celebrate them in a moment because the Kansas City Chiefs, like Tyreek Hill and Chandler Jones, were talking about 5 championships, 10 championships. Like what the Lightning just did, 11 straight playoff series. And then what it takes to beat them at the end is the very best of the very best being the very best. Like that is a worthy champion. And Mike wanted to see that champion. Mike actually wanted his futures. Mike was rooting for Game 7. So Mike is again a loser. And
I found myself rooting for Tampa at the end. I don't know if it's just because maybe I wanted to see a good series. Like overall in the series, I obviously wanted Colorado to win, but last night found myself rooting for Tampa. And then after the game, they were so emotional. You wouldn't think that after winning 2, you'd be like, all right, we're good. You guys have this one. Fat Pat was like literally crying in the press conference. It was just weird how hard I know it's weird because they won it. They're professionals. It was weird how demoralized they were after winning 2 in a row.
Did you not see? You say it's weird, and it's because we don't understand. These people are physically broken from taking pucks all over their body. Everybody was in horrible pain. It's weird that you care that much. Go out there and get hit at 100 miles an hour again and again with a puck and have your leg falling off while you play in Game 6 because you're trying to get Game 7. Strange that you care so much about that you would cry afterwards.
It is wild because people think the aggressiveness of hockey is all checking. The scariest shit in hockey is the guy sliding across the ice in the middle of it, like right before a slap shot. Like people don't really think about it. People just think of fighting and checking, but it's really the shots in the face you take from a puck that can do the damage.
It's like literally getting shot by a gun. Yeah. It's like this thing is just coming like so fast. Look, we have actually one right here. Like Dan, you want to throw it at you?
I don't think it's literally like getting shot in the face
and we
with
have
a gun.
Puck, not a gun.
Otherwise, there would be corpses.
Well, all over. You know what I mean.
Excellent start to your week, Tony. And I was beginning to say...
It was a good start. We're here.
Come on.
We come here, man.
Next time it's like metaphorically taking a bullet.
We come here, man.
Literally.
You do come here, man. I don't know where Stugotz is. Jessica is not here today. Billy's on a cruise somewhere. Amin is supposed to be here, but he's doing another one of these red-eye things. He's a lunatic. He comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning and is late all the time. But the thing that I wanted to talk to the group about today, that something that's happening in media that I'm really enjoying, even as it becomes dumber and dumber and dumber. It's not just Skip Bayless saying, I'm going to keep calling him Westbrook, and Westbrook saying, don't say anything on Twitter that you wouldn't say to my face, and then Bayless doing the move of, come on my podcast, we could talk about how you're the most overpaid player in the sport.
It's not undisputed anymore. I mean, he said undisputed or my pod, but he's throwing in that, he's wedging in that podcast.
Yeah. But on top of that, so you've got this wrestling outfit over here, and this is what gets birthed by all of the combination of that league made stars, and then the next thing we did is we fed off the soap opera stories for 15 years. So now we've turned it into that as spectacle, as entertainment, and lines are going to be crossed, and Draymond's going to be rewarded for the same things Bayless is rewarded for, and you can judge it, you could be discerning, or you could just accept that this is the new form of entertainment in sports media. When Draymond Green says new media, he means that he's willing to do that, but also his basketball analysis, what he's fed up with is that these people aren't as good analyzing basketball as he is. They're just not.
But Kendrick Perkins played.
He played, but Draymond does a good job of dismissing and disparaging the way that he played.
Well, I think he's been critical. Like Draymond, this is all emotion here. Draymond, I mean, Kendrick Perkins was critical of Draymond, so that's why Draymond, like, Kendrick is new media. He's a player breaking down the game. Draymond just doesn't like him because he said some shit about him.
So you can only be the elite athlete and then be that as a commentator. So you can't be an okay athlete and be a commentator. That's not good enough.
Draymond is going to disparage at every turn. It is good for his business, and there is no disputing that his business is good. I just present in front of the audience as entertainment. This is much different than how Tim Legler would do it. Like, if you give over your basketball operations to Kendrick Perkins, this is how some of this stuff is going to spill all over the place, because Kendrick Perkins, one of his, he's authentic and he's not afraid of anybody, and he speaks more freely than most athletes do.
But Tim Legler is on SportsCenter with SVP after every game, doing exactly the kind of basketball breakdown that Draymond Green is apparently pining for. I'm not entirely sure that that's what Draymond Green is pining for. Otherwise, he wouldn't make headlines by starting fights with people, because that's very much old media. Old media is clickbait and headlines and having a go at people that are your critics. I agree with Chris. I think this is an exercising of a personal vendetta or personal vendettas. But
Kendrick Perkins is good. Not to cut you off, I'm sorry. Kendrick Perkins is good at this. Like, I would put him, if you were saying 10 other guys besides Draymond who are like good at this media stuff.
Yeah, but they don't like each other because Kendrick Perkins tried to fight Steph Curry a long time ago. Speaking of which, I wanted to, I heard a couple of funny stories this weekend. Kendrick Perkins said on the JJ Redick, Old Man and the Three podcast, that one of the things that the Celtics did to settle beef between Rondo and Ray Allen is they had them get the boxing gloves on and just fight it out. Like, something that I don't think most workplaces can understand, this form of problem solving. And in doing some of the reporting around the Heat that we'll talk about in the local hour, and just listening to some of the stories about how Jimmy Butler will test and trample all personalities with his version of crazed because he doesn't mind these things getting physical, I was reminded of a time when the Knicks under Pat Riley, eventually things would escalate to the point where either Xavier McDaniel or Charles Oakley or Anthony Mason, they just have to fight. They would just have to get in the middle of the basketball court and fight. And the rule was not boxing gloves. The rule was once someone goes down, no kicking, no anything once someone goes down. So one of these fights, I don't know which one it was, one of these fights with, I'm going to say it's Oakley and McDaniel, but it's one of these three, it's all of these three menaces. It made its way through the bleachers and everywhere else before, like, Patrick Ewing eventually ended up separating people. But what I learned that I did not know is that the one that nobody wanted any part of in those situations wasn't any of those three guys. It was Anthony Bonner.
What? Why?
I'm just telling you, I don't know why, but I'm just telling you that nobody wanted a piece of Anthony Bonner, that was the scary guy. All these other guys have the reputation. All three of the guys that I mentioned, Xavier McDaniel, Charles Oakley, and Anthony Mason, had the reputation, but it was Bonner that everybody was afraid of.
I don't even know what Anthony Bonner looks like. I'm doing that purely based off his name. And what it makes me believe is that he must be a trained fighter of some sort.
I know what you're doing there, Woody. You're thinking of Matt Bonner and
yeah,
being like,
you know
how?
What? Good shout. Good shout. That's 100%
Anthony
what I'm
Bonner is
doing.
not
In my
Matt
head,
Bonner.
I see Matt Bonner. That's what I see. I see Charles Oakley being like, I want no part of Matt Bonner.
That is so great. That no wonder you were so confused by that story when it became about Matt Bonner.
Well, Anthony Bonner looks much
Totally different guy.
Wow.
I was half listening and I thought you guys were talking about Matt Bonner.
I love the idea that you guys had Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason, and Xavier McDaniel running scared from Matt Bonner. It's particularly funny because he's redheaded. Does he have?
Yeah, why is it weird?
Looks like a big Chris.
I don't get this.
I'm
could
looking
run
at a
from Matt
recent
Bonner.
picture of Anthony Bonner, and I would
He
be
looks
more scared of
terrifying.
him now than Charles Oakley in 1997.
You guys do realize that we've escalated to the portion of the proceedings in media coverage where we're talking about fights between Westbrook and Skip Bayless, a 70-year-old man. Westbrook is saying, do not call me Westbrook. You wouldn't do it to my face. And we're headed toward a situation where Skip's gonna do it to his face. And then where are we? You really want to see Westbrook beat the shit out of Skip Bayless?
And can I tell you something? Sure. Skip Bayless has bona fides in this area. He did it to Chris Bosh. I saw a clip of this get circulated again in the aftermath. So Skip Bayless used to call Chris Bosh, when he was playing poorly, Bosh Spice. Oh, that's right. And in 2011, he went on First Take, and Skip Bayless says, "I do not regret when you play poorly calling you Bosch Spice."
After Chris Bosh had said,
it went on a whole soliloquy about how, my name means a lot to me and it means a lot to my family, and basically a lot of the same logic that Russell Westbrook is putting across now. Skip Bayless basically said, "I hear ya, but I'm still going to call you Bosch Spice."
you guys do understand we're in a new place, though, right? We're in a new place where Kendrick Perkins is saying, Draymond, do you want to fight? These are not usual media things. This is not the way we usually do things in this sphere.
Dan, I've got it figured out, all right? You know I'm an idea guy, right?
Do I know that about you?
Yes, Dan. Tommy Fury, Jake Paul, happening very soon. Yep. Undercard, Kendrick Perkins, Draymond Green, Westbrook versus Skip Bayless. Who doesn't watch that?
Me.
I would not watch that?
All right, see,
you're crazy.
You're lying.
You're lying. You're
You
absolutely
would.
lying.
I know. I get what you're doing here. You're not for this circus stuff. You'd watch.
Kendrick versus Draymond in a ring with boxing gloves on. Who does not want to watch that?
Well, I'll watch the clips on social later. I'll watch the clips on social.
Do you want to? Don't you think that Bayless and Westbrook would feel like Pedro Martinez and Don Zimmer? Like you don't act. He's a 70-year-old man. Like what are we doing?
Skip Bayless would back himself, though. I really believe that. I think if a punch was thrown, I think he'd punch back. In a podcast studio. Now, in a boxing ring, you have to throw punches back. But I think in a podcast studio, if Westbrook leaped across the table and tried to start fighting him, I wonder. Now I'm thinking, is Skip Bayless working on his physique so much in the event that he has to one day physically defend his take? Quick one.
Say we just play through. Just let the
play on.
Just keep playing don't let the audience know that these alarms have been plaguing us all morning. Yes,
I can't hear anything at this point, so we might as well.
You know what? I had never thought of that. That he has one day decided he might have to actually physically defend himself in sports takes. And so that's why he has beefed himself up to such a degree to prepare to defend his LeBron James opinion.
You say one day. He's always been a lunatic about fitness, but I've told you the story before, and this was before the ascent of Skip Bayless, really, that when he was covering the Dallas Cowboys, he wrote a book irresponsibly reporting from anonymous sources that Troy Aikman was gay, and Troy Aikman asked his attorneys what it would cost if he went into the locker room and just punched Skip Bayless in the face. And if the answer had been, and I don't remember the exact numbers on this, but if the answers had been it would be less than $1 million or less than $5 million, he says he would have done it. But Aikman had his remorse about working at the same network as Skip Bayless over some of this stuff. And I don't want to judge it because there's plenty at this trough for a whole lot of people to do it a lot of different ways. But I do ask you guys and the audience, as an entertainment spectacle, how do you feel about these things escalating to a place where the athletes are threatening the media members? Because they all have their own power now. They all have their own platforms, and they don't have to just take it quietly from the media anymore. So if you're throwing popcorn at Westbrook, he's going to react. And if you're doing this, when Westbrook has asked you not to call him Westbrook, and furthermore, you're defiant Westbrook, who's averaged a triple-double, and you're an MVP in the league, and you are probably, for the first time in your life, actually doubting yourself at basketball. And now this guy's there to be a piranha, to be not helpful, and to invite you on his podcast so that you can help his podcast ratings.
Well, that's the thing that's so sad. Either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself invite someone on your podcast to argue with you. That appears to be what sports takeitude is right now. But it's just, for me, it's just so childish. Like we're really going to sell this by fighting. And really the precursor to all of this was when Stephen A. Smith looked into the camera and said, Kevin Durant, you don't want to make an enemy out of me. Like it was like a looming threat. Like what is that supposed to mean? And it's the direct call out it's just so bizarre. Like I understand that we're in now a social media culture where everyone is looking for the fodder to motivate them, right? But the part where we can't just have a conversation on television about a sporting event without it getting this level of personal, it's so bizarre to me that it would resort to fighting.
It is very childish. It is very childish. I think we should move on to other things. He should fight fire with fire and call him Shit Bayless.
Wow.
Or Skip Your Show Bayless. You know what I mean? Something
That's
like,
good. That's
you got
a
to
good
fight
one.
fire with
I
fire
like that
here.
one, yeah.
Don't get physical. You come back at him. Let's create a name for Skip Bayless. Huh?
It's always lamer. It's always lamer. Like when
Skip
people,
Your Show Bayless. Pretty good.
like when Donald Trump did the thing of
This guy gets it.
of giving everyone a nickname, and then John Oliver did Donald Drumpf was apparently his old nickname, and so people started calling him Drumpf. It always became lame. Like it never works to fight fire with fire when the fire is insults from a playground.
I want to defend Skip a little here. This is such a ridiculous thing for Russell Westbrook to get seriously angry at. You know, it's just like Westbrook. Like it's just wordplay.
He should know by now, right?
It's one of those things where,
How about don't shoot 30%?
but you can't tell someone to not get upset about their family name, right? If that has significance to them, you can't tell someone that it doesn't matter. Now, it is an unbelievably childish insult, and in the grand scheme of things, means absolutely nothing. But I don't know.
Like-
I don't feel comfortable telling Russell Westbrook
All
like,
the pros that come with being an athlete, all the money, all the fame. If you got to deal with Westbrook, like I get it. If it was more like egregious and like it's just so
Okay,
harmless.
you say that as the man who just got done telling us why do the Lightning care so much as pucks fly to their face that they cry at the end. Like, yes, you want to be entitled to your things. I get that. I actually heard on satellite radio, forgive me here, because it was Andy Furman on with somebody, and they were talking about Kevin Durant and why Kevin Durant is so sensitive on Twitter, etc. And they were talking about the Bayless thing, and they just said it's part of the business. And I'm listening. I'm like, well, is it? Because you're saying that Westbrook just has to take this because it's part of the business. And then he said, we should do that. We should engage one of these athletes so they have to comment on it, and then we can get into a back and forth. And that part is not just dumb and dirty and silly. The rewards in this, if you engage one of these guys, if you piss them off, if you insult them so that we can have the conversation, he's making $47 million. Why do you care about being called Westbrook? That particular guy whose pride you have no doubts about.
And he shoots a lot of bricks. Like, that has to be irrelevant here. It's very clever because he's terrible at shooting. I just think there's a line on this stuff, and I don't think Westbrook crosses the line. I don't think it's worth of.
Yeah, but there's a line. I understood.
Getting threatened.
The line for you is different for him.
That's true.
And again, he's not as confident as he has been, and he has asked people to please stop doing this.
But to your point about the new media, is that not largely what this is about? Like, the new media is about creating an environment in which those insults or the response of the athlete to, no, I will not just take this because it's part of my salary. Part of my salary is getting yelled at by fans. And basically, increasingly, the response is no to, in Kyrie Irving's case, basically being told, well, you have to show up for work in order to get your money. No! I will not show up for work in order to get my money. It's completely flipping the construct to be everything in the aspect of pro player. And I think, Dan, over the years, you've been very pro player. I'd find myself to be very pro player. But there are moments where it's like, that's sort of what the $47 million covers. It covers, a massive amount of interest in this sport. Thus people talk about this sport. Thus sometimes people insult you. That's what the money's for.
It is an unwritten part of the contracts that as a professional, you're not the one who climbs into the stands and reacts to this stuff. But after a pandemic and after those guys not wanting to perform in the bubble and the disgrace and the indignity of, yes, making a lot of money, but churning through it after George Floyd in a way that made them all a little uncomfortable as a black league, you start adding all of that stuff on top of each other, and Westbrook has now been the meat shield again for many years in that sport, but with the Lakers, he's getting all the blame for the stuff that's happening there. And again, he's the guy that when we returned to some form of play, somebody threw popcorn at him, and he wasn't having that. Like, he's not the one for this. He's not going to just eat it in the name of professionalism, in the name of, he's asked people, please don't call me Westbrook. Now, I don't know why he doesn't reach out to Skip personally and tell him to stop doing that, as opposed to feeding the monster because now we all end up talking about it, and we all end up talking about how much is an athlete supposed to eat here. Because I don't disagree with you, Chris. He should be professional above it, not engage, and it would be better for all parties. But if he's hurt at the end of what the last 12 years have been in that sport, when Kyrie and Durant are about to ruin the Nets in record time with what happens if you give the players all the power, if you give it all to them, the dangers of that. Westbrook is out here, and he's telling you at the end of his career that he's going to be just as defiant in all of it. And the thing that I'm presenting to you guys and asking the audience as well, is this how you want your media? Because we like the soap opera stuff and guys escalating to a place where they want to fight. That's not bad as us consuming it in entertainment. We love in this sport the beef. We love the soap opera. We love the personality conflicts. Westbrook is famous because he's polarizing and he bumps up against it in every locker room, and people understand, wow, that superstar is a little bit difficult to understand. Doesn't smile a lot, doesn't laugh a lot, seems like he's hissing and competitive. What do I know about him? He plays really hard, and he's a meat shield for criticism next
plays
to
with
superstars.
A perpetual middle finger, I would say. That's his modus operandi, is just middle finger.
So does
all the time.
Draymond, and so does Draymond, who is revolutionizing, modernizing the modern day Barkley. Because Barkley was not like this. Barkley had his polarizations, but Barkley ultimately was likable. Barkley would slap you on the back, get along with people. He was in on the joke. Draymond's not like that, and he's the manifestation of what has happened over all of it. Over the last 25 years, the modern-day Barkley's going to be with a middle finger. It's going to be less nice than Charles Barkley can be.
Don't you have to be a little likable, though? Like, I think Draymond won't do as well in this career as we think he might do. I think he's going to be honest.
He's already started off incredibly well,
Yeah,
though.
but I just think when it's not gonna, over the long haul, he's not going to be as likable. Like, I agree with everything Dan just said. There's something different. While everyone's anointing him the next Barkley, there's just some, Barkley's just got this quality to him that
no, but
I agree.
It's going to be the modern, it's going to be, man, I was on a street corner in Philadelphia, 2 competing newspapers holding up the Barkley headlines on the street. Barkley, I'm a 90s N-word, is what it said across both newspaper headlines. He was on chains in Sports Illustrated. He, too, was polarizing. Now he's gotten older, and it's a smile and a wink, and he's in on the joke. But Barkley's nice to people and isn't trying to fight everybody. He files it under honesty and says you got to deal with it, but it is softer than 30 years later what Draymond is doing. Barkley also a lot better player than Draymond ever was. And Draymond is making a career for himself as a third person on a team, which rarely it doesn't happen very often. And I do believe he says things that are inflammatory enough that in the modern age, as angry as it is, as acidic as it is, this becomes what Barkley looks like 30 years later if you keep pouring all of this lighter fluid and fertilizer on it. From Skip Bayless is going to be attacking Westbrook, and the result is now Draymond's like, no, I'm coming for all your jobs. I'm not here to take gruff off of any of you.
I think Draymond is basically Charles Barkley who reads his replies, essentially, right? It's someone who lives day in and day out, minute in and minute out in the criticism of you. What I'm fascinated by is that Draymond Green, for the moment, is positioning himself as new media. How long does one get to be new media before you eventually become old media? Because at a certain point, you become more known for being like Charles Barkley, in my opinion. I know more about him as a broadcaster than I do as a basketball player. And I think Charles Barkley, to a younger generation, including Kevin Durant, who said, you're just jealous of us because we made more money than you did. And I think to a lot of modern players, Charles Barkley represents old media and the thing that they're trying to replace. Well, presumably at some point, Draymond Green is going to have to get by on the charisma that he has, I think, as a very good television personality. I don't agree with you guys. I think this is acidic competitor, not who he is as a person. I think as a television personality, Draymond Green will come across as much more likable, and has when he's done inside the NBA. But at a certain point, you have to develop that character of who you are as a television personality, and I don't think it's going to be centered around the fundamental basketball analysis where you're teaching us things about how you played the game. No, it's going to be about starting fights with people and just eventually resorting to all the tactics.
Well, he can do both. He can do both, and he can do it for 25 years.
The thing is, we don't go to Barkley for basketball analysis, right? We go for the fight. We go for him and Shaq goofing
you go
around.
For the character. He's a character.
Who do we want that gives us basketball analysis? Like, who's the person that you go to for X's and O's?
But Barkley doesn't give off like he's trying to pick a fight with someone. He just is like, he's going to be completely honest. Whereas Draymond just kind of feels like he's trying to be polarizing.
Draymond cares less, I think, how you receive his anger, defiance. And Barkley doesn't care very much, but I just think Barkley's softer. Am I wrong in saying that? Because
yeah, I think so. I mean, Draymond Green will forever, in his mind, as a basketball competitor, be the guy that was drafted 35th overall and had basically a stroke of luck in Steve Kerr randomly deciding to start him from the beginning because Mark Jackson didn't play him very much. And his career is a surprise. And I think he'll always carry that around with him. And again, I do think that every basketball player that is active on social media reads their replies. Steve Kerr even said it himself to Zach Lowe after they won the championship. Every one of these guys knows what's said about them all the time, everywhere. And it affects them. And it affects someone who we don't even view in this way, which is Steph Curry, right? Steph Curry, who eventually said, what are you going to say now? It was a narrative that built in his head, never really vocalized it, but a narrative that built in his head based off of everyone talking about the finals MVP. I don't think we can underestimate what reading your Twitter replies does to your psyche. And I really believe that Draymond Green, coming from a place of perhaps even doubting himself, to then having an incredibly successful basketball career off the back of it, how much receiving that criticism affects him.
I think we receive the criticism here as a show, right? Like,
Yeah.
You're on your own thing. Imagine that 100-fold on people watching you, millions of people watching you, and you messing up, and then those replies after the locker room, and you're reading them. I think this entire generation of the NBA and sports in general has been molded by social media. It's hardened and jaded them so much that it's like, they have to be this. There's no other way for them to be.
I think that as you read these reports and studies about young people harming themselves more than they used to or being unhappier than they've been, part of it is the toxicity of that thing that's not real, feeling real all the time, which is the anonymous things people could say in the stands or behind your back at all times. But you had to be in front of, as a reporter, you had to go confront in the locker room once upon a time. If you were going to write these things, Westbrook, you couldn't do it from afar. You had to go into the locker room and answer for what it is that you were doing. And that's part of what is splintering here. So many people saying so many things without governance, anonymously, cruelly, as Kevin Durant smokes dope in his home and just reads through all of it, partially addicted to this stuff, and becomes a superstar that seems a hell of a lot less happy than the other ones, given how great he is. Because, of course, it's going to distort these people to now be hearing everything everyone is saying from every angle when you made a decision, a business choice, to go to Golden State and try to please those people by, you say, I can't win a championship. Okay, I'll go over here and win a championship. And it just blew up in his face.
And to your question earlier about how do you feel about this and how would you feel about if there was an actual fight at some point between a media member and an athlete, it's just a slow erosion of what feels normal. At one point, as you said, you wrote a column in a newspaper and you had to defend it. And slowly over time, as we saw web traffic be the main metric by which you measure writers, there was a recognition that, oh, if I say the most controversial thing, even if I don't necessarily believe it, there is money, there is profit in this, and I don't need to necessarily care about the institution of the take, the institution of writing. I'm going to progress in my career by taking whatever lane is available. And slowly but surely, as everyone started to realize this, it only gets escalated. It's never de-escalated. No one ever goes at one point, all right, let's stop with the hot takes. Let's stop with trying to piss athletes off to make money. Let's all stop. Let's recognize what we're doing here, and let's get back to some decency. It's only going to escalate. And so if there is ever an actual fist fight between Kendrick Perkins and Draymond Green, then maybe the next one is in a cage. It's a UFC match. Like that's not an end point. That's a starting point.
It makes it all. It reminds me of the Barkley quote of the locker room when he says, the locker room is racist, sexist, homophobic, and I miss it, is what Barkley's quote is. When I listen to what it is that you're saying, everything is made dumber, smaller, crueler, and I kind of love it. And I don't feel good about myself for saying that. But if I could step back from it and be like, wow, this is dumb. Really, this is where we're going. After Rachel Nichols flames out at ESPN, the first voice we're going to is Kendrick Perkins to talk about that publicly. Okay, Kendrick Perkins is in charge now. And what's in charge now? He wants to go fight Draymond. All right. Let's see where that ends up. Because what Kendrick Perkins has done there. Now, Paul Pierce left ESPN because they didn't like what he was doing on social media. Kendrick Perkins just said, I'm going to put my job down over here. And he did not, it's crossed the line. Once Draymond calls Kendrick Perkins what he called him, this is where it gets crueler. You have to keep pushing it. Draymond's thinking about, what are the things I need to do? Who do I need to engage? Draymond likes conflict, enjoys it. Kendrick doesn't seem to mind it. And now you're here for the entertainment in it, but I do want you to know it is dumber. We're all dumber for it. We're all smaller for it. And we are all crueler for enjoying it.